All right, let's dive into the world of Indian media. You've brought us some pretty fascinating stuff on DB Corp Limited. They're the folks behind Dinik Bhaskar, those newspapers. But they've also expanded into radio and digital.
They have. It's quite a diverse portfolio.
Yeah, so we've got their financial statements,
Official ones, yep.
a transcript from their Q3 FY25 earnings call,
Straight from the source.
and even a list of questions you have about their performance. Looks like we've got our work cut out for us.
It's going to be interesting for sure, especially because at first glance, their performance might seem a little underwhelming, but when you really factor in the challenging year they've had,
Yeah.
right? And the whole context of the high base from last year, it actually paints a much more nuanced picture.
So there's more to this story than meets the eye. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, for starters, they actually managed to achieve their highest ever 9-month performance.
Really?
Yep, both in terms of revenue and profit. Total revenue for the 9 months grew by 1% to $18,544 million, which is about $225 million USD,
Wow.
driven by a mix of advertising and circulation revenue. So, not a huge jump, but
Odd still.
still, considering they're coming off a year of, record earnings.
That IS surprising, especially with all the economic headwinds and everything. What's their secret?
A big part of it is their incredibly efficient cost control. They've really streamlined their printing processes, optimized their distribution networks, and negotiated better rates with suppliers.
All while maintaining the quality, I hope.
Oh, absolutely. This kind of meticulous management is honestly pretty impressive, especially in an industry that's facing rising costs everywhere you look.
So they're being smart about it, not just cutting costs for the sake of it, but doing it strategically to maximize their profitability.
Very clever. Now, you mentioned a high base from last year. What did you mean by that?
Right, well, last year's election cycle, remember? It created a massive surge in ad revenue for media companies.
Ah, of course. So that makes it tougher to achieve year-over-year growth this time around.
I see. So that 1% growth is actually pretty impressive when you think about it. They're going up against that election-fueled boom from the previous year. Okay, what about this 39% HGR growth in EBITDA over the past 2 years? I saw that in the financials, and that sounds pretty significant.
It is. And what makes it really noteworthy is that it's a measure of their operating profitability, right? It indicates that they're not only growing their revenue, which is great, but they're also becoming more efficient at generating profit from their core operations.
Okay, so it's a good indicator of their overall health as a company.
Exactly. For someone like you, following the company, this kind of sustained growth in EBITDA is a very positive sign. It suggests they're in a strong position to handle, market fluctuations and keep delivering value to their stakeholders.
Got it. So it's not just about the top-line revenue, it's about how effectively they're turning that revenue into actual profit. Makes sense. So they're doing well overall, but I'm curious about the breakdown of their revenue. What's the split between advertising and circulation?
Sure. Advertising brought in $13,058 million for the 9 months, and circulation contributed $3,562 million.
So advertising is still king.
It is. It's clearly their main source of income. But what's interesting is the role of circulation revenue.
Right. Because even if advertising goes up and down, people still need their news, especially in a place like India with such a huge, diverse readership.
You got it. Circulation provides a steadier, more predictable flow of revenue, which acts as a kind of cushion when advertising might be a bit softer. This really shows DB Corp's smart approach. They're balancing different revenue sources to build a more stable and resilient business model.
Makes sense. And speaking of diversification, they're not just a newspaper company anymore, right?
Yeah.
They've got radio as well. And I remember seeing something interesting about that in their earnings call transcript.
The radio business is doing really well, actually. It saw a 9% year-on-year growth, reaching $2,287 million in revenue.
Nice.
And get this, their EBITDA growth in this segment was even better, at 11%.
Wow, they're on a roll.
They are. This consistent growth in radio, alongside their, core print business, really shows how effective their diversification strategy has been. It's not just about spreading their bets. It's about finding synergies and building this comprehensive media ecosystem.
Yeah, that makes sense, building that ecosystem. And no media ecosystem these days is complete without, a solid digital presence. But DB Corp has been pretty quiet about their digital performance, haven't they?
They have. We know they have 19 million monthly active users.
Okay.
Which is, a pretty decent number.
19 million.
But beyond that, yeah, they haven't really shared much. which is understandable, I guess,
Yeah.
especially in the the current digital news environment.
Yeah, because it's not exactly a gold rush for digital news outlets, is it?
It's not.
We've seen plenty of like struggles and closures in that space.
We have. And it is a tricky business.
Yeah.
Building a profitable digital news operation,
Yeah.
it's a constant battle for readers and for ad revenue, especially with like the big guys like Facebook and Google taking such a big chunk of the pie.
Right, right. So is DB Corp's approach, being sort of quiet about it, is that a sign of weakness or is it more like strategic? What do you think? Are they holding back for a reason or are they just, hesitant to reveal any potential problems?
That's a really good question. And I think it kind of reflects this larger debate about transparency versus, you know, keeping things under wraps in this digital world. On the one hand, being more open about their progress, even if it's not all, amazing, that could help build trust with investors and attract good talent.
Right.
On the other hand, revealing too much too early, that could give their competitors an advantage.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
tough call.
it is.
But they did say a few things I remember about their digital ambitions, like their expansion into new markets.
Uh-huh. They did. They specifically mentioned growing their focus to 14 states, including Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, which are like huge markets for Hindi language content.
And that's where their flagship app, Dainik Bhaskar, comes in. They've already made a name for themselves, right, as a leading news app in both Hindi and Gujarati.
Exactly. So they're taking their brand strengths and their, knowledge of those languages, and they're using that to reach those new areas. And from what I gathered from the earnings call, it sounds like they're not just focused on, just reaching more people. They're also looking into different ways to make money from it.
Did they say anything about the kind of like experiments they're running? Are they thinking about subscriptions, paid content, or like something completely different?
They were a bit vague on the specifics, which,
Mhm.
again, points to their kind of cautious approach. But they did say that they've seen some encouraging results.
So they're like testing the waters a little bit,
Yeah, they're dipping their toes in, trying things out to see what works.
but not jumping in headfirst just yet. Makes sense given how like complicated the digital news scene is.
Yeah, there's no easy answer when it comes to monetizing digital news.
It seems like they're taking a cue from the tech world, that whole test and learn kind of thing.
Exactly. Smart move. By, experimenting with different things and really looking at the results, they can figure out what works for their audience and then adjust their strategy accordingly.
But while they're being careful with, their digital rollout, they're obviously still investing in growth there. We saw that in their financials.
Oh, absolutely. A big chunk of their expenses is going toward, all that digital stuff, building their infrastructure, creating content, and probably like marketing and technology too.
Yeah.
It seems like they're really committed to finding that balance,
Mhm.
between their strong print business and their digital goals.
It's like they're building a bridge,
Kind of.
using their established print business to help fund their digital expansion and
Mhm.
hoping to turn those loyal print readers into digital subscribers.
Smart strategy, especially considering like their strong presence in smaller markets where print is still really important.
Yeah, exactly. Because digital might be booming in big cities, but there's still a huge part of the population in India that relies on print for their news. DB Core is in a unique position to like connect those two worlds.
They are. They've got the name recognition, the networks, and the understanding of, those local communities that a lot of those digital-only companies just don't have.
So this bridge building idea, it seems like a key part of their overall plan. We see it in how they balance their revenue, their move into radio, and now their approach to digital. What does that tell us about their like long-term vision?
Well, I think it suggests that they see the media landscape, not as this winner-take-all kind of thing, but as an evolving, ecosystem.
Oh, yeah.
They're not trying to get rid of print and replace it with digital or the other way around.
Right.
It's more about creating this model where both can like work together and support each other.
So instead of being afraid of digital, they're seeing it as this chance to reach more people, engage new audiences, and basically tell more stories.
Exactly. That's a powerful position to be in. But, speaking of their long-term strategy, we should probably talk about the big issue that's, kind of looming over everything, the whole newsprint price situation.
Right. Because it doesn't matter how well they manage their costs or diversify their revenue, if newsprint prices suddenly skyrocket, that could really mess things up. So how are they dealing with that? It's a tough spot to be in for sure, trying to make sure their papers are affordable while also, keeping an eye on their own profits. So how are they planning to handle those ups and downs in newsprint prices?
Well, from what they've said, they seem pretty committed to keeping things affordable for their readers.
Yeah.
They even hinted that they might, absorb some of those price increases themselves if things get really out of hand.
That's a pretty bold move, especially in such a competitive market.
Hmm.
But is that really sustainable? What happens if those prices just keep going up?
That's the big question, isn't it? It
Yeah.
really depends on a few things like, how much those prices actually change, how well they can control their other costs, and if they can find other ways to um, make up for any potential losses.
Which brings us back to those, impressive cost-cutting measures they've taken. They're really good at finding ways to be more efficient.
Yeah, and those skills are going to be even more important now with all this uncertainty around newsprint prices.
Right.
They'll need to get creative, find ways to keep costs down without sacrificing the quality of their publications.
Because if they start cutting corners too much, that could backfire. They could lose readers, and that would hurt their advertising and their circulation revenue.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that balance. And it really highlights, one of the key takeaways from our deep dive today, the importance of being adaptable.
Yeah, I think that's a great point for our listener to think about. DB Corp is a perfect example of a company that gets it. They understand that to succeed in media these days, it takes more than just having a good product. You need to be flexible, think ahead, and be ready to make tough decisions.
Couldn't agree more. They're not just sitting back and watching things happen. They're evolving, they're responding to those changes in the market while still, staying true to what they believe in.
It's pretty inspiring, actually. We've seen how well they're doing financially, their dedication to their readers, their, cautious but ambitious approach to digital, and their willingness to tackle those challenges head on.
They're definitely a company to watch. The media world is constantly changing, and how well they adapt will ultimately determine their success in the long run.
Well, after this deep dive, I'd say they're off to a pretty great start.
I think so too. They have a solid foundation and a clear vision for what they want to do.
And now our listener has a much better understanding of DB Corp, not just the numbers, but what those numbers really tell us about how they think strategically and where they fit in this, ever-changing media landscape.
We went beyond just the headlines, right?
Yeah.
We dug into their financial performance, their careful steps into the digital world, and how they're dealing with those industry challenges.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this deep dive gives you some valuable insights and a way to think about analyzing their performance going forward.
And as we wrap things up, here's something for you to think about. We talked about DB Corp's balanced approach, right? But what if they, took a bigger risk? Imagine them going all in on a hyper-local, community-focused digital platform, something that uses those strong connections they have in those smaller markets.
That's an interesting idea. A platform that combines the trust and familiarity of their print brands with, the interactivity and targeted reach of digital.
Exactly. It could be a real game changer. They could connect with a whole new generation of readers, find new ways to make money, and really cement their position as a true, multi-platform media powerhouse.
It's definitely something worth exploring. It shows you the potential for innovation and growth that DB Corp has.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I encourage you to keep an eye on DB Corp. They're a company that's moving forward, and their story is far from over. Thanks for joining us.